for you. It's the top of the hour, and it will continuously and incrementally reduce as the hour concludes. If you're listening on a podcast, live streaming, love to have you aboard. You can also hear this on demand, and you can visit me anytime you want by simply going to Cary Harrison, CaryHarrison.com, CaryHarrison.com. You can catch a bunch of videos, and most importantly and most excitingly, sign up for the free, our favorite price newsletter, in which you're going to get podcasts, often several times a week, with stuff that I just cannot say on the radio. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of stuff you can't say on the radio. It doesn't mean naughty words. It doesn't mean salacious content. It means basically content that maybe whoever the political powers that be will not allow. And remember, here on KPFK, we support this station because we're willing personally to take that risk. If I were to say something, I would get fined $750,000. And I don't have it. So good luck. Another reason, as I hack and wheeze, I just scared the heck out of myself there. But it's a very effective tool to stop people from saying things that are inconvenient to those who have the money, have the power, have the prestige. Let's take a look quickly before we get into something really cool later on. We're going to be looking at Aipac, which is the giant PAC fund for Israel. How did it come into existence? Not what you think. Who's behind it? Not what you think. And why this country is beholden to it. Not what you think. This is going to be a first-time education for 99% of you. And it's not a anti-Israel, a pro-Palestine. It's not pro or against anybody. It's just one of my favorite things in the world and something I'm devoted to, pulling the curtain behind the man. Just like the Wizard of Oz. What could be more fun than Toto, as you remember, grabbing the curtain and ripping it apart, and there you saw the wizard. Turning wheels, pulling cranks, and you're like, oh, but wait a minute, I thought, but, exactly. So you're going to learn about that, and then you'll also learn what it is and what its mission is. And you get to make a decision in your democracy, whether you think it's cool, whether you think it's a foreign operative, which technically it is, except somebody forgot a long time ago. Other people have to register. Some people do not. Just like one of my favorite books written by George Orwell, Animal Farm. Some pigs are more equal than others. So we're going to talk a little bit about the sty, who's in it, and who gets what out of it. But first I want to just comment, give a nod to one of the bravest women on the world. You will probably never see her again, because the Saudis have just thrown her in prison for 45 years. 45 years because she used social media to, quote, violate the public order. We don't know which public order that is, or if that was the orders that she wasn't following, but Jamal Khashoggi, a name that nobody should ever forget, a journalist from the Washington Post who ended up in Turkey, and the Saudis had him chainsawed and carved up into nice small bite-sized pieces, thrown in a suitcase and removed forever and ever. He started an organization called DAWN, D-A-W-N, and that's an acronym for Democracy for the Arab World Now. Well, she happened to share or retweet some of the tweets from there, sufficient to have a half-century prison sentence, which she will not survive, you and I both know. A woman in Saudi Arabia, 45 years for being an enemy of the state. She will surely perish within a year or two. Now, what is the subtext here that you and I are probably not allowed to really think? If we really think, we're given to believe that in Saudi Arabia, and if you're the king or the prince, you declare what is true, what is not. You've already said women are weak, useless, ought to be thrown in burqas, shut up, go into the kitchen. You have nothing to contribute. And if something has nothing to contribute, how is it a threat? Seriously. Put on a black tarp over yourself. Walk around in a tarpaulin and do nothing but clean dishes and raise somebody else's offspring. What kind of threat are you if you're that useless where you have to wear a tarp? where being detarped is somehow shows maybe you have something to contribute, something to offer. Unless this is the way to make sure that you have nothing to offer because, in fact, you surpass the menfolk by leaps and bounds. So you have to be thrown under a cloak and kept hidden because you are a ticking time bomb of intelligence, of intuition, of capability, of prowess. I mean, really, this is this moment invites us all to think about that, as opposed to, oh, they're just a bunch of animals. And that may be true. That may not be true. But it's not a matter of are they good, are they bad, what a bunch of authoritarian, which I believe, all true. But the point is, what does it say about women? The second one of them gets out, now, one of them got out, put it back. They are powerful creatures. Have you ever historically heard of a great international or world leader who did not have a kick-ass wife? Probably not, except for Adolf Hitler. But then he didn't have a wife until the last 3 minutes of his life, allegedly. And that's a second backstory, and it wasn't a woman. So we'll probably talk about that yet another time. The point is somebody having your back. And women are powerful creatures. You better believe it. Think about ancient Greece. I love Greek mythology, not because I give a rat's about Zeus and Ganymede and Phaedra and all the rest of them. I could care less. What I do like is what they represented. The fact that the most ferocious fighter ever was Athena, a woman. She kicked ass. Poseidon, the king of the ocean, who could boil and roil every bit of water like giant tsunamis all over Earth, and yet she was more powerful. So much so that Athens, the capital of Greece, was named after her. Europa, named after a woman. Europa, another mythological goddess. All of Europe is named after her. Powerful. So when one of these women leak out, jump out of their burqa, poke through, right-click, and do something on Twitter like reshare or whatever, it causes mayhem and a furor. So I just want to tip my hat, doff my cap to this woman whose name is Salma al-Shahab, 34 years old, PhD student at Leeds University. Smart, got out, got an education, realized her power, did something as simple as social media, which is not anonymous in Saudi Arabia. Not anonymous here, by the way. Everything you have ever tweeted, everything you have ever shared, everything you have posted on Facebook, a permanent outline of who you are. And I mean who you are politically. If somebody ever decides retroactively to come after you, they can. So be mindful. We're seeing this all over the planet. We're seeing it in our own country with our MAGA friends who would be just as happy to point out whatever you've written or shared as somehow you are not only a communist, but you probably, I don't know, believe in climate change, and therefore you must be removed. So this is a call to action on many levels of intelligence. And just my hat's off to all powerful women. Talk about bravery. I mean, it's easy enough for a man. We've never had to kind of hide in the shadows. We just own the joint. We act like it. We're raised to believe it. We walk into a room. It's not a big deal. Some walk in with a little more swagger. Some have to go to the gym and pump it up a little bit because they don't feel quite up to the game. But this is just cosmetics. If you're a woman, you are truly a different creature in mankind. You're a serious threat. Just like if you're gay, you're a serious threat because you cannot be controlled the same way. You're not marching to the same drum. You're not going to burn in the same hell or have the same belief systems or be pushed around by the church because of family. You're a self-serve pump. And women in many ways are at the self-serve pump. They have to conform and fit in because we declare them to. But when a few of them step out and do something as simple as what a regular guy would do on a Thursday, 34 years old, 45 years in prison. Again, a woman in Saudi Arabia sentenced to decades in prison by the kingdom's terrorism court for using social media to, quote, violate the public order, according to court documents seen by a human rights group. Court documents, meaning the documents of the court of Saudi Arabia. We're not talking about necessarily some really well-educated, brilliant, legally balanced minds looking to do something great in the world. These are just the court documents, which makes any kind of decision or move official. 45 years after a specialized criminal court convicted her of, quote, using the internet to tear Saudi Arabia's social fabric. To tear. I didn't know Saudi Arabia's social fabric was so delicate that a 34-year-old woman could tear the social fabric by going on the internet. She probably was shopping too. Maybe researching something, maybe sending an email at the same time, but she tore irreparably the social fabric of Saudi Arabia. Oh my God, the power of a woman and a mouse. Think about this. The power, the terrorism court, like what she did, she fired up her Dell or whatever she's using and went on the internet. I mean, it's laughable if it were not Aldous Huxley, if it were not George Orwell, if it were not any other book or science fiction movie created in the last 25 years, or any of the dystopian movies on Netflix, which is all there is, by the way. Amazon Prime catching up quickly, AMC being the originator, whether it's zombies or whatever. All of this is the political zeitgeist of where we're living and ways to look, connect, and reflect. So let's support our women no matter what. And let's remember that part of this abortion issue, this reversal of Roe v. Wade, the Dobbs decision, it's not about necessarily controlling women. One of the best ways you're ever going to learn about who's doing what and why is to check out Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, CNBC, and look at what the financial leaders are saying. This would be akin to following what some might call the Bilderberg Group, some might call the Illuminati. If you believe in any of that crap, non-crap, people actually do meet here and there. They just met in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, didn't they? The Fed did. Not open to you and me necessarily, but definitely open to them. Lots of skiing and cocktails. And just laid out what interest rates would look like, and the stock market has just absolutely hit its feet, its knees in supplication because of that. So it's important to understand, to note, to think about, to observe, to analyze, to accurately assess, to use critical thinking, and understand that what abortion really is, when looking through the eyes of financial people, is they like to explain the code. Now, they're not necessarily against it, but they're in the business of commodifying politics, commodifying social behavior, and finding a way to extract money out of the situation. And they have special skill sets that I don't have. I'm not an engineer. I'm not sitting around thinking, how can I spin this into some cash here? I don't have that talent. My brain, I don't have a math brain for that. But they will talk about how the abortion issue is the response to what the white, what do we call them here? No, not white separatists, because they're not separate from anything anymore. You know, the white race, MAGA, European, all this other crazy crap. These ones that say that the white race is being bred out of existence, and they believe this to be true. It is not untrue that other skin colors may be expanding at a faster pace, as there's a little Freudian slip. It is not untrue, but it's not a meaningful event unless you are one of these people that thinks the only ones allowed to play in the game have to be white, Christian, male, heterosexual, etc., fill in the blank, have a nice day. So part of the interesting thing that a lot of our financial people are saying is that part of the reason of removing abortion is it forces, and you're now going to see at least 150,000 new white people being born by force, 150,000 new, let's just call them Christian soldiers, able to do the Lord's work. This is how they look at it. So how does it articulate itself? Well, you simply don't allow abortions. But wait a minute. Black women are also then not allowed to have abortions, and neither are others. They don't matter the same way. As far as these white superior people are concerned, people of color are just working people. They'll just work in the Walmarts, pump gas, whatever, kind of not there. They can stay poor in the South, out of sight, out of mind. But the idea is to beef up the white race, which is perishing. This is the plot of the play. It looks like going against abortion as if somehow Jesus popped in and once said a thing about it. Anyone can find a single sentence Jesus ever said about abortion. I want to see hands go up in this room right now. It's radio, so I can't really hear it, but none, zero, because he said nothing. So it's not a thing. It's only a thing because it's a political thing, but it's a way to force more white people into the world. So please start to use critical analysis. Please start to look between the lines. As we look at this poor woman in Saudi Arabia getting 45 years in prison, she will never survive it. You and I know it. She'll be raped within the first year and just bludgeoned to smithereens for this terrorism court going after her for simply going on the internet, shooting a couple of tweets out that violates the public order. And for her, a half century in a prison is the least they can do, and that's normal. But there's layers of why that matters. It's layers of what the threat a single woman poses to the entire, as they say, social fabric of all of Saudi Arabia. One chick. So all of this, everything that happens, always has secondary and tertiary meanings. Okay, enough. And I feel so much better after saying that, by the way. Cary Harrison with you. This is the Cary Harrison Show. You can check me out. Get a free newsletter, and you're going to get a lot of content like this, stuff even more penetrating and deep, including videos and other things, simply by going to CaryHarrison.com, CaryHarrison.com. You can also follow me across all social media at Cary Harrison. Before we jump into what is AIPAC, how it was born, as I said before, most of you, I mean 99%, will have had no idea. You've heard of AIPAC. You've heard of the United States' unwavering support for Israel, even at times when, let's just say, the behavior has appeared quite naughty. We've had plenty of programming here that does at least give some voice to Palestinians, to others. You've gotten to hear a more balanced representation, but you may not know how this thing came about, how it was born, and we're going to hear in just a couple of minutes from Grant Smith, who's going to lay this all out, and they have put together a radical new series of podcasts that breaks this apart piece by piece. So it's going to be very important for you to know. Meanwhile, a quick shout out to KPFK. Why? Because that's why we're here today. We have just, in the past 17 minutes, covered, 6 different topics that you would never hear on CNN, never hear on MSNBC, never hear on NPR, never hear really on any AM or FM radio station anywhere else in the country. But you just heard it here, and nobody came in and knocked me off my chair. It doesn't mean that a few people at the Xerox machine or at the coffee machine might not want to, but they still won't. Why? Because free speech supersedes people's taste buds. Good taste buds, bad taste buds. My allowance, my ability, my right to say what I know and what my research, and I am, of course, responsible for my own research, but all of that has as much right to see the light of day as yours. And when mine becomes greater than yours, then your right diminishes, and now it is not equal. And equality is the name of the game here. KPFK is an amazing place for this. It has since 1959. I mean, we're talking, cars with wings. This was one of the first, if not the first, public radio station in the United States when nobody had FM radio yet. That's right. You are listening to the strongest FM signal west of the Mississippi. People didn't really have FM yet until maybe the late 60s, early 70s, and it was all beautiful music, except for us. Ho-ho! Stirring it up. And we still are. And that's why we need your support. You can call 818-985-5735. Make a donation that you can afford so that you can participate. Your voices can be heard. And when you write to me or you comment on the free newsletter at CaryHarrison.com, I will include your comments so that your voice is also heard. I wish we could take live calls during a fund drive. We can't because the phones are forwarded to our donation center. Otherwise, it'd be open phones for me 24/7, as it probably will be starting next week. 818-985-5735, 818-985-KPFK. Pick up the phone right now. Pick it up. Dial 818-985-5735 and donate whatever you can to keep not only free speech, your free thoughts, but that of your children, that of your friends who may never have any access to what they're about to hear in the next 5 minutes, the beginning of what they're about to hear. They will have never heard it. It may not ever be uttered again on radio. I certainly hope it does. And when people have to podcasting, well, podcasting is now better than radio in many ways. Let's just face it. I mean, you listen to Clear Channel, iHeart, Cumulus. I mean, seriously. So, the cool kids are doing podcasts, but I do not think that the podcast of our upcoming guest would ever be allowed on radio. I mean, no way a program director is going to go, oh, this is great. The phones are going to ring all day. I just can't wait to come to work. No, not ever going to happen. That's why it's important for you to hear this. KPFK, 818-985-5735, 818-985-KPFK. Donate whatever you can. You can also go and securely donate at kpfk.org. kpfk.org. Just take your mouse, click that. Yes, that's it. Click that button. Bam! And throw in whatever you can, whatever you're comfortable with. We're here for you. And I'm not one of these guys that's going to tell you it's going to cost you this many hundreds of bucks or this or that. You're getting information. To me, you can give me a DVD, you can give me a backpack. I don't care. I can go to Walmart and probably get one for $3 if I ever admitted going to Walmart, which I maybe just did. And there's only 2 in town, and it's a long drive, so I probably don't go very often. My point is, I can get stuff on Amazon or whatever if I really need a backpack. What I don't get on Amazon or Walmart is this kind of information. I don't get it generally in books. I don't get it generally on the internet. But when we find people, when we find information like this, we give it to you freely. And we ask you to freely give back so that we can continue to do so. So one final shout out for KPFK. Dial 818-985-KPFK right now. 818-985-5735. Throw in whatever you can in the till and make sure that free speech continues. You can also go to kpfk.org. Coming up in just a second, we're going to talk to Grant Smith. We're going to learn about where AIPAC came from. You listen, this is the real James Bond stuff. Where it came from, how they're listed with the government, and how they're, should we say, ignored by the government, and their effect and impact over all these times. If you recently saw any of the documentaries on Scientology, for instance, or the Mormon Church, you'll find certain similarities in a way. That's why this is going to be fascinating and gripping. Cary Harrison with you. This is the Cary Harrison Show. Hang on, more to come.
Do you owe $10,000 or more to the IRS?
Then get on board with the Tax Admiral and let us steer your way to financial freedom.
The IRS is the largest collection agency in the world. They can freeze your bank accounts, seize your car, home, will garnish your paychecks and benefits.
Don't take on the IRS alone. I can fight for you using industry secrets that can help stop the IRS. I'll cut your penalties, slash your interest, and reduce your overall tax bill. Sometimes I can even get it 0 sold out completely.
We're an A-rated company with over 30 years experience helping people clean up their mess with the IRS. And we have a 95% customer satisfaction rating.
If you owe $10,000 or more to the IRS, are facing an audit, a lien, or levy, then call me right away. You're in charge with the Tax Admiral. Call me now for your free emergency consultation.
Call 877-252-5765. That's 877-252-5765.
And see how long she lasts. Death, it's life's after dinner mint.
America, we'll celebrate anything.
GoHarrison.com.
Cary Harrison.
Harrison's Reality Check. Reality Check Live with Cary Harrison.
And it is 26 minutes past the hour, whether you're listening live in Los Angeles and beyond or in podcast. Unless you fast forwarded, then we have no idea how many minutes it is past the hour. But I want to introduce you to a brand new friend of mine. We just had a small conversation earlier this afternoon, and he had a sense of humor. I was shocked, I have to say. I like that. It's unusual, especially when they're really smart. So I think you're going to like him, too. His name is Grant Smith, director of the Washington, D.C.-based Institute for Research, Middle Eastern Policy, which has just released a podcast series called How Israel Made Aipac. IRMEP, as they're called, is the co-organizer of the annual Israel Lobby Con Conference. Israel Lobby Con Conference, kind of like Comic-Con, but probably even more fun. Held at the National Press Club that analyzes and critiques AIPAC's lobbying program. We're going to get into what is AIPAC, because if you don't know somehow, I mean, it's possible. It is possible. We're going to actually lay that out for you. Oh, them. Yeah. He's the author of numerous books about AIPAC, including Big Israel, How Israel's Lobby Moves America, and America's Defense Line, the Justice Department's battle to register the Israel lobby as agents of a foreign government. I want to welcome you so much, Grant Smith, to the Cary Harrison Show, and thank you for being here today to lay out what really none of us knew.
Hey, Cary, thanks so much for having me on. And I just have to say, you're taking shots at Bullwinkle. He's a Minnesotan. I'm a Minnesotan. So I take a little bit of umbrage to that.
Well, I will attempt some kind of backhanded apologia a little later. I'll sneak it in. You won't even know what happened.
All right. I'll be listening.
All right. So let's just jump into AIPAC. It's a phrase we've heard generally on clips when politicians talk. They don't break it out otherwise, except when they're raising money somewhere. It's as if it's kind of a secret thing, but it's also a big major policy thing. Tell us about AIPAC.
Yeah, so AIPAC is the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. It's been around since the 1950s. And in the words of its founder, Isaiah L. Kennan, it was founded because Israel needed American economic assistance. So we've done some, as you say, radical things in researching AIPAC, such as reading everything published by its founder, such as looking at its tax filings, such as reviewing its conferences and what politicians say at its conferences. And as you mentioned more recently, we've even launched our own conference series that would occur right before the annual AIPAC policy conference here in Washington, where we'd have a number of experts, whether it was Gideon Levy of Haaretz and Israel, or Larry Franklin from the office where the Secretary of State Colin Powell launched the war on Iraq, and have them comment on their interactions with AIPAC. So we've put a lot of effort into the question of answering something that never comes up in any of the news reporting. I mean, if you can imagine a documentary about a religious group that you mentioned, or about the Koch brothers organizations. Imagine seeing an entire documentary about Americans for Prosperity, but the Koch brothers are somehow never mentioned. Their donations are never mentioned. So this has been, I think, kind of a dereliction of duty. There's a lot of reporting about AIPAC right now because it's recently formed political action committees to take out progressive Democrats in primaries, and it's been very successful, knocking out Andy Levin, Don Edwards, Glenn Ivey. And so reporters are kind of up in arms talking about how this isn't good, spending up to $5 million, $6 million per race, but they never answer the question, where did AIPAC come from? And so we've put out this 13-episode podcast, accurately names How Israel Made AIPAC, which goes through AIPAC's history and really puts it all out on the table. And I think our single most important finding is that according to a Senate investigation and a Department of Justice investigation, AIPAC was set up with $50 million of Israeli funds shipped in through various conduits to conduct public relations and lobbying. And that is in the record, but it's something that nobody wants to admit.
Grant Smith, I'm just going to jump in because also, were they not initially required to register under FARA, F-A-R-A, the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which we had recently? The Russians had to register. The Chinese have to register.
Right.
This was part of the Foreign Agents, as in secret agents, Registration Act.
Yeah, they were ordered. So they were the lobbying divisions, the public relations division of this umbrella organization called the American Zionist Council, and they were ordered on November 22, 1962, to register as foreign agents. But they managed to launch this massive internal campaign against the Department of Justice, against the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and they never complied with the order. So the fact of the matter is that one of the reasons AIPAC itself is so circumspect about its origin story, and the reason there is no biopic about AIPAC, I mean, on their website, they say, we emerged from a boutique of interest groups in the 50s. I mean, yeah, right. One of the reasons for that is this question is still out there. The full record from the Justice Department about the order to register and all of the back and forth, sufficient to create dialogue, which is in our podcast, only emerged in 2008, kind of piecemeal. And so although some Justice Department officials knew about the order and the implications of all of this, nobody else did. And FARA filings are supposed to be public, and this was kept secret.
I'm just going to jump in because people drive in exactly 19-minute increments. We found out those are the latest statistics. So people may have outdriven who you are. We're going to drive them right back in. We're talking right now to Grant Smith, director of the Washington, D.C.-based Institute for Research, Middle Eastern Policy, just releasing a podcast series called How Israel Made AIPAC. Co-organizer of the annual Israel LobbyCon conference held at the National Press Club, analyzing and critiquing AIPAC's lobbying program. He's the author of numerous books about AIPAC, including Big Israel, How Israel's Lobby Moves America, and America's Defense Line, the Justice Department's battle to register the Israel lobby as agents of a foreign government, which they once were. But it would be akin to, let's say, Grant Smith, Cuba having a PR organization, or let's say a propaganda arm here in the U.S., registering as a foreign agent, and then let's just say falling out of compliance and being left out of compliance. Same with Venezuela, but Switzerland has to be in compliance, as does Germany and France. How does that work?
Yeah, how does that work? Well, I would use the Dominican Republic as a whipping boy, and as part of the same Senate Foreign Relations investigation in 1962, 1963, Trujillo was found to be lobbying to get sugar sales back into the U.S. after various groups in the U.S. had banned their sugar, and all sorts of corrupt stuff like the disappearance of human rights workers. And they had lobbyists who weren't declaring under FARA either. Contrary to what happened to the lobbies for Israel, some of them were prosecuted. Some of them received some jail terms. There was a guy by the name of Sylvester Viereck from lobbying for Germany during World War II of all times, and he went to prison. So, there is this varied enforcement. And what we've seen over time is that the U.S. gets pretty eager to enforce FARA whenever a Russia campaign or proxy conflict is going on, or the Cold War, and is more and more reluctant to enforce it over so-called allied nations, where the political heat can come on fast and hard. So you don't see too many FARA orders to Great Britain or Germany or NATO countries. You do see Venezuela, as you mentioned, and Russian agents getting prosecuted all the time. So it's a very interesting approach, but the law itself is a disclosure law. It doesn't say you can lobby on behalf of a foreign government, but if the proper forms had been filled out, and by the way, AIPAC's founder did register for a while, but if the proper forms had been filled out, AIPAC would have declared that they received $50 million in startup funding to launch this little influence operation, and Americans and the government would have been aware of that and might have asked more questions about who was receiving the funding, which included the New York Times radio station, all sorts of authors of publications in the then famous Saturday Evening Post, and all sorts of newspapers, and academics who were going on speaking tours funded by Israel, basically. So, it's influence operations can have a huge impact. I think the media environment back in the 50s and 60s and 70s was a lot different than it is now. But this is an argument that the pushback is always, well, Israel isn't funding AIPAC now. They're not putting all these millions of dollars into races. And my pushback is, yeah, but the organization was set up with foreign funds, and there's this order that would have required 2 annual reports at least every year from AIPAC since 1962 that haven't been filed. They're a very intransparent organization that's in constant communication with Israel. I tend to steal titles from, statements. Benjamin Netanyahu said that America is very easy to move. So I put in my book, Big Israel, how the lobby moves America. Isaiah Kennan, the founder of AIPAC, who nobody's ever heard of, said that AIPAC was basically Israel's defense line. So I wrote a book called America's Defense Line about everything Kennan did to set it up. Not a very good strategy, but there you have it. This story is fascinating. It's every bit as fascinating as Scientology.
We're just going
to
pause on that for a second, because I just need to point out who and what we are here for the radio side of it, not the on-demand side of it. Cary Harrison with you. This is the Cary Harrison Show here on KPFK 90.7 FM in Los Angeles, and a variety of different affiliates here, there, and everywhere. We're doing right now providing for you information you are not going to hear anywhere else, including access to this podcast series. And whether you throw a nickel, a dime, $100, $150, $200 at KPFK, you still get to hear the podcast. So this is the honor system. This is my particular flavor. You support us any way you can, and you take what you want, you leave the rest, you make your own decision. But we do ask that you make sure that the free flow of information such as this, this is a radical conversation, let's face it. This is like forbidden territory. When organizations like AIPAC go after Jewish politicians for not being supportive. They're not going after a bunch of WASPs necessarily. They're going after their own people who are not towing the line. This is pretty classic everywhere. And if you don't know about this stuff, you can't navigate your own political shores, and everything is Donald Trump, and it's just all so hopeless. It's not. It's tennis. It's nothing more than ping pong and tennis. But if you're not holding the racket and you can't see the net, you think it's bigger than you. And maybe it's financially bigger than you, but it's doable. You can go to CaryHarrison.com, CaryHarrison.com. You can get our free newsletter where you'll get this kind of content, a video of this, unedited, uncensored, plus a bunch of other stuff that we simply cannot do, nor do we have time on the radio. I'm also going to probably start doing a more often repeated podcast series, audio podcast series on KPFK online, where you go on demand to the Cary Harrison Show, so you can hear more cool stuff like this. We're talking to Grant Smith, director of the Washington, D.C.-based Institute for Research, Middle Eastern Policy, and who has just released this podcast series, How Israel Made AIPAC. And we're talking about who they are, where they come from, and what the goal is. And one of the things that you mentioned, Grant Smith, is you talked a bit about how policy changes. But let's understand, why Israel? Why not Qatar? Why not anywhere else in the Middle East? Well, Israel has, they don't brag about it, but about 150 thermonuclear weapons. In other words, they are our military base in the belly button of the Middle East. That's the question that keeps getting asked over and over again. But why Israel? Like, why? Is it a hangover from World War II? Partially, but they're very, 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 very useful. Let's talk about that, Grant Smith.
Yeah, so that figure, 150 weapons, is actually former President Jimmy Carter's figure, and I think it's accurate. So there are two ways of looking at this. Some argue that Israel is America's aircraft carrier in the Middle East, and others argue that, with all the relationships with countries like Qatar and Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, which have hosted American military bases, that there are other aircraft carriers as well. The bottom line is that the Kennedy administration was fighting tooth and nail to keep the Israelis from going nuclear in 1961, 1962, after they saw the Dimona nuclear weapon production facility being built, and they were very hard line on the Israelis to permit U.S. inspections. LBJ, to your side of the argument, basically said, I don't want to hear about the Israelis and nuclear weapons anymore. So there's been a sort of dual track of American calls for restraint and American do whatever you want. And then, of course, Nixon agreed with Golda Meir that there would be this, strategic ambiguity and nobody would ever talk about it. And there are, in fact, regulations in the U.S. saying that U.S. government officials can't talk about it. So, this is, I think, it's a representation as well as the power of the lobby. Some of the major Israel lobby donors, such as Abraham Feinberg, who helped Truman with his whistle-stop presidential campaign financing and supported Democrats all the way up through LBJ. He just happened to be the head of the Weizmann Institute for Science in Israel, which was a major part of their nuclear weapons infrastructure, just like our national laboratories. So there's a lot of overlap with lobbyists and these various initiatives that you just don't see with other countries. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, they don't have anything like that.
Coming up, we're going to hear from Grant Smith as we talk about his podcast that is truly a radical piece of brilliant audio, How Israel Made AIPAC. It's something that you're going to be able to get on your own. And we do ask that you support KPFK so we can bring you more people like this. Coming up, you're going to hear a little bit about why I just forgot what I was going to ask you. But I guess we're going to discover that in about 28 seconds.
Preventing truth decay.
Truth Decay.
Cary Harrison.
Do you owe $10,000 or more to the IRS?
Then get on board with the Tax Admiral and let us steer your way to financial freedom.
The IRS is the largest collection agency in the world. They can freeze your bank accounts, seize your car, home, will garnish your paychecks and benefits.
Don't take on the IRS alone. I can fight for you using industry secrets that can help stop the IRS. I'll cut your penalties, slash your interest, and reduce your overall tax bill. Sometimes I can even get it zeroed out completely.
We're an A-rated company with over 30 years experience helping people clean up their mess with the IRS. And we have a 95% customer satisfaction rating.
If you owe $10,000 or more to the IRS, are facing an audit, a lien, or levy, then call me right away. You're in charge with the Tax Admiral. Call me now for your free emergency consultation.
Call 877-252-5765. That's 877-252-5765.
Cary Harrison here with you. This is the Cary Harrison Show. We're talking to Grant Smith, director of the Washington, D.C.-based Institute for Research, Middle Eastern Policy, which has just released a podcast series, How Israel Made AIPAC. IR MEP, excuse me, the humidity is awfully high in here today. IR MEP, that's IRMEP, is the co-organizer of the annual Israel LobbyCon conference held at the National Press Club, one of my favorite places, where you can get really good coasters for about $2.50. But that's just an internal thing that only I know about and probably Grant. Anyway, this Israel LobbyCon conference held at the National Press Club analyzes and critiques AIPAC's lobbying program. He's also the author of numerous books about AIPAC, including Big Israel, How Israel's Lobby Moves America, and America's Defense Line, the Justice Department's battle to register the Israel lobby as agents of a foreign government. And Grant, we were talking a little bit earlier. You had mentioned, as just sort of flew by as a fast sentence like Bullwinkle, that progressive Democrats were being deselected, overwhelmed, and removed from the opportunity to properly and fairly run. What would a progressive Democrat have to do with the happiness and success of AIPAC?
Well, we just have to go back to the reason AIPAC was set up. It was set up to receive unconditional and the majority share of the U.S. foreign aid budget on an annual basis with no conditions. I mean, that's what its founder established it and said he was establishing it to do. So if you have people like Donna Edwards, mild critic of U.S. aid to Israel, or Andy Levin, a Jewish Democrat, head of his synagogue, but who had some mild criticisms of the treatment of Palestinians, they both represented a threat to that economic aid. And if you do the math, at $3.8 billion in annual aid plus $1 billion for Iron Dome missile defense, every one of these members of the House of Representatives is worth $9 million to Israel. And so if they vote the wrong way, maybe they'll move the whole thing and they won't get the $3.8 billion or the extra subsidies for the missiles. Senators are worth even more. They're worth $48 million apiece to vote for the aid. So the sort of raw calculation is you can't have people in positions of voting on aid packages that might vote the wrong way. But it doesn't really matter that they're progressive Democrats. Back in the day, Paul Finley, the 20th District in Illinois, was criticizing U.S. aid to Israel. He was taken out. Charles Percy, 67 to 85, also a Republican senator in Illinois, critical of U.S. aid to Israel, taken out. And even in California, Republican Rep Pete McCloskey, taken out in 1983. And, his sort of criticisms of the aid and everything were also a contributing factor. So it doesn't really matter that they're progressive Democrats. What matters is they will not, AIPAC will not tolerate any threat or any candidate who's not going to toe the line with the Israeli government's needs.
Cary Harrison with you. This is the Cary Harrison Show. You can get our free newsletter at CaryHarrison.com, 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 in which you're going to get some of this and other stuff that we simply cannot do, will not do on the radio, ain't allowed, not for the purpose of naughty language or anything like that. It's just certain content you just can't get away with, no matter where you are. This one is high risk today anyway. But it's important that you have access to this. Otherwise, you have no idea what's going on. And as I said earlier, one of my favorite things in the world is to rip the curtain off the wizard and show him twirling the dials and all of that so that you can decide, do I love it, do I not love it, or do I not care? But if you don't know any of those three choices, you're just sitting there going, I don't know why the world is spinning out of control. I'm clueless. Some people are brave and will explain this to you. This is not, and we always have to make this disclaimer, some kind of weird crypto anti-Semitic something. It's not an anything. It's business, baby. It is big, powerful business. It is the ebb and flow of money, whether it's petrodollars, whether it's info dollars, whether it's this, whether it's that. Let's ask you, Grant Smith, director of the Washington, D.C.-based Institute for Research, Middle Eastern Policy. Not that you have the exact answer, but maybe just being around this long enough, you can offer us some thinking on why is Israel so intensely, into this? Like, what's the payoff here?
Well, I mean, the payoff is being the recipient of more U.S. foreign aid since 1948 than any other country, and far in excess of what was delivered to Europe under the Marshall Plan. It's now well over $250 billion in aid that we know about, and there's also a substantial tranche of intelligence support in black budgets that has not been disclosed, although we've tried to get it under FOIA and various other means. It's also, again, the blanket permission to have the region's only nuclear arsenal and U.S. protection that it will never successfully be allowed in the United Nations for there to be a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East. It's sort of carte blanche to do whatever it needs or feels it needs to do in Gaza and the West Bank. So the U.S. is critical for Israel. Israel could not do all of this without the United States, and there really isn't another sort of superpower patron that it could get to work on its side at this time or even before. So, the question of why it does it is that the U.S. is the indispensable benefactor to Israel. Back in the 1940s, a lot of the organizations that helped put together AIPAC also helped Israel by smuggling surplus World War II weapons to Israel and doing all sorts of clandestine things. Well, that's not really practical over the long term. So instead of sort of smuggling weapons and buying them as scrap, nowadays they're really working on providing politicians with the campaign cash they need to run or primarying them, and then they provide the weapons to Israel that it needs or feels that it needs to maintain its position. So the U.S. really is indispensable to Israel, and that's why AIPAC exists. That's why Israel made AIPAC.
We're going to have to say goodbye to you because I have to shamelessly pitch for the station for the next 3 minutes, which I do with pleasure, by the way, as I speak with you with pleasure. This has been a magnificent education, and though I hated school when I used to go to it, I love the school that I've gotten after my schooling. If they had taught me this stuff, I never would have. I'd be 100 years old sitting in that wooden desk going, more. But it wasn't offered. It will never be offered except here on this platform. I want to thank you so much, Grant Smith. Give us the URL so we can go check out this podcast.
Yeah, so if you want to see the podcast, just go to howisraelmadeaipac.podbean.com. You can also check out irmep.org. There are links to individual episodes. And thank you very much, Cary.
All right, my friend, we'll have you back. Just to reset who we've been talking to, Grant Smith, director of the Washington, D.C.-based Institute for Research Middle Eastern Policy, which has just released a podcast series when we were talking about how Israel made AIPAC. IRMEP, that's IRMEP, is the co-organizer of the annual Israel LobbyCon conference. It's like Comic-Con, but more fun, held at the National Press Club that analyzes and critiques AIPAC's lobbying program. Author of numerous books about AIPAC, including Big Israel, How Israel's Lobby Moves America, and America's Defense Line, the Justice Department's battle to register the Israel lobby as agents of a foreign government. So, hope you enjoyed that. Hope you got a big, fat, full, delicious smorgasbord of information there that you will regrettably never forget. I wish you could, but you can't. So there, now you're responsible for information and how you redistribute it for the betterment of mankind. And just make sure that everybody is balanced. Boy, wouldn't that be fun in the world? Like KPFK, balanced. We do everything in our power to bring on a bunch of different voices. Whether you agree, whether you disagree, but you have a right to a full spectrum of information. That's why you can support us simply by calling 818-985-5735. Put in $1, $2, $10, $15, $20. You're getting it all back. If you got this as a course in college, it might cost you $20,000. And they're still not going to give you the full story. They're going to make you read a textbook, which was written years ago by somebody else who owned a printing press and has a very limited view. This is unbelievable education you're getting here. And you can share this podcast. You can take a link, share it with everyone you know, and you're giving away free education. 818-985-5735. Make a donation. Make it right now. And know that you're supporting free speech, supporting education in school systems that simply do not, will not ever offer it. And this is radical stuff. Let's face it. This is the man behind the curtain stuff. This is the wonderful spying conspiracy stuff, but it's real and therefore even more delicious. You can also go to kpfk.org, kpfk.org, and make a secure donation. Or, as I said before, call 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735. Cary Harrison with you, inviting you to also go to caryharrison.com, get our free newsletter, get more impactful stuff, just like you've been hearing today, that you won't get anywhere else. And I do it at my own peril because you need to know, because I've been lucky enough to have been exposed to a really good education, and part of what they taught me is it's a paradox, but you got to give it away to keep it. Makes no sense, but it turns out to be true, much like spirituality, I suppose, in many ways. So go to caryharrison.com, get the free newsletter, and make sure you support before the last of the golden tones of my golden glottals here evade the airwaves. Call 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735, and go to kpfk.org and make your donation today.
Cary Harrison. Reality Check. Live.
Like NPR. On it.
Do you owe $10,000 or more to the IRS?
Then get on board with the Tax Admiral and let us steer your way to financial freedom.
The IRS is the largest collection agency in the world. They can freeze your bank accounts, seize your car, home, will garnish your paychecks and benefits.
Don't take on the IRS alone. I can fight for you using industry secrets that can help stop the IRS. I'll cut your penalties, slash your interest, and reduce your overall tax bill. Sometimes I can even get it zeroed out completely.
We're an A-rated company with over 30 years experience helping people clean up their mess with the IRS. And we have a 95% customer satisfaction rating.
If you owe $10,000 or more to the IRS, are facing an audit, a lien, or levy, then call me right away. You're in charge with the Tax Admiral. Call me now for your free emergency consultation.
Call 877-252-5765. That's 877-252-5765.